The sound of the hammer echoed across the yard that Saturday morning. The fence had been leaning for months, one strong wind away from collapse. Patricia wiped the sweat off her brow, feeling relief with every plank replaced. To her, it was nothing more than maintenance, the kind of thing a responsible homeowner did to protect property value. She had no idea that by tightening those nails, she was loosening her grip on the very house she loved. By Sunday afternoon, the new fence stood proudly. Straight, sturdy, freshly painted. Patricia stepped back, admiring her work. Her neighbors nodded approvingly. A few even complimented her for finally addressing the eyesore. She smiled for the first time in weeks, thinking maybe, just maybe, her little corner of Georgia suburbia would finally feel like home again. Then, on Monday morning, she saw the envelope taped to her front door. At first she thought it was junk. A flyer maybe, or a misplaced package notice. But the bold letters at the top froze her breath. Notice of violation. Her stomach twisted as she ripped it open. The words swam in front of her eyes. Unauthorized structural modification to property boundary. Fine assessed, $2,800. Failure to remit payment may result in land proceedings. Her knees went weak. $2,800? For replacing rotten wood? She stumbled inside, clutching the paper like it might burn through her palm. Her husband, David, found her at the kitchen table, pale and trembling. She handed him the letter. His face hardened as he read. "This is insane," he muttered. "They can't fine us for fixing a fence." But Patricia knew better. Everyone in the neighborhood had whispered about it. The HOA had become ruthless, fining families for the smallest infractions. A mailbox too faded, $500. A flower bed out of alignment, $1,200. Last month, the Johnsons across the street were threatened with foreclosure over a cracked driveway they hadn't repaired fast enough. People called it petty. Patricia now saw it as predatory. She reread the violation, trying to understand. The language was cold, legalistic, clearly crafted by someone who knew the system better than she ever could. The fine wasn't just a number, it was a threat. A reminder that she didn't really own her home. Not fully. The HOA had power over everything, from the color of her shutters to the shape of her fence. One misstep, and the board could jeopardize her entire mortgage. That night, Patricia couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling while David tried to reassure her. "We'll fight this. They can't just do this." But his voice carried less conviction than usual. He had seen the lines before, the neighbors forced into legal battles they couldn't afford. The HOA had deep pockets, a team of lawyers on retainer, and a reputation for dragging residents through court until they broke. Morning brought no relief. Another envelope arrived, this time certified. She signed reluctantly, her hands shaking. Inside was a formal notice. Failure to pay within 14 days would trigger daily penalty fees of $200, compounded. At that rate, the $2,800 could snowball into tens of thousands within weeks. She pictured their savings evaporating, their equity swallowed whole, their house listed on some foreclosure website for strangers to bid on. Patricia's mind spun through worst-case scenarios. What if they couldn't pay? Would the HOA really force them out? Could they afford a lawyer? She had read stories online of families losing homes over less. $500 fines ballooning into six figures. Homes auctioned at a fraction of their worth. Lives destroyed. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. The HOA thrived on fear, and she was now their newest target. David tried calling the HOA office that afternoon. He was kept on hold for 47 minutes, then transferred, then dismissed. "It's in the bylaws," the representative said flatly, and the board voted. "The fine stands." He hung up, his face red with rage. "They're not even pretending to listen," he snapped. "This is extortion." Neighbors began to notice Patricia's tension. Some sympathized, whispering warnings about their own battles with the board. Others avoided her, afraid to be seen siding with someone marked for punishment. It was like living in a quiet dictatorship, where every smile concealed fear, and every neighbor could be a potential informant. Patricia realized that repairing the fence had not improved her home. It had painted a target on her back. 3 days later, another notice arrived. This one colder, sharper. Immediate action required. Non-compliance may result in referral to collections. Patricia felt her chest tighten. Collections. The word carried weight. Destroyed credit. Endless phone calls. Financial ruin. She imagined her children's college dreams collapsing under the weight of a ruined FICO score. All because she replaced a fence that was falling apart. That night, Patricia broke down. She sat in the living room, bills spread across the coffee table, and sobbed into her hands. It's not just a fence, she whispered through tears. They want to take everything. David wrapped his arms around her, but even he looked powerless. The mortgage payment, the car loan, the credit cards, they were barely balancing as it was. An unexpected $2,800 wasn't just a fine. It was a wrecking ball. When the kids asked why she was upset, Patricia lied. She said she was tired. But in truth, she was terrified. She couldn't shake the image of sheriff's deputies showing up at their door, padlocking their home, her children watching as their belongings were hauled away. She imagined the neighborhood gossip, the judgment, the shame. She wasn't just fighting a fine, she was fighting for survival. On the 7th day, she received an anonymous note in her mailbox. No envelope, no return address. Just a folded piece of lined paper with 5 words. You're not the first. Fight. Patricia stared at it, heart racing. Someone else had been through this. Someone else knew the pain. But who? And why now? She tucked the note into her pocket, the smallest spark of hope flickering inside her. That night, Patricia couldn't decide what scared her more, the HOA's power or the possibility that she wasn't alone. Either way, her life had changed forever. The fence she thought would protect her family had instead torn a hole in their security, and now the wolves were at the door. The anonymous note stayed tucked in Patricia's purse, folded and creased from her restless hands. She carried it like a talisman, even though she didn't know who had slipped it into her mailbox or what it truly meant. But those 5 words, you're not the first. Fight. Not to wait. No, not now, I am not. Were a lifeline. For the first time since the violation, she wasn't drowning alone. Someone out there knew what she was going through. The only question was, could she find them before the HOA crushed her family into silence? By the following week, the fine had already grown. The second notice declared a balance of $3,600 with penalties tacked on. It came printed on heavy paper, stamped with a logo that made Patricia's skin crawl. The language wasn't just legalistic anymore. It was mocking, smug, as though daring her to resist. Each sentence reminded her that the board held the hammer, and she was just another nail waiting to be struck. David tried again to reason with the HOA, this time showing up at their office in person. He walked through glass doors into a pristine lobby filled with brochures about community pride and preserving property values. A receptionist with a practiced smile informed him that board members did not take walk-in meetings. He could submit a written appeal and wait up to 90 days for review. 90 days. By then, the penalties would eclipse their mortgage. When David returned home, he slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. They're not going to stop, he told Patricia, pacing the living room. This is their game. They bleed people dry with fines and then take the house when you can't keep up. His voice shook with rage, but beneath it was fear. The kind that seeps into your bones when you realize you've underestimated your enemy. The neighbors grew restless too. Whispers carried across the cul-de-sac. Some avoided eye contact, afraid of being associated with Patricia's family. Others offered quiet sympathy but urged caution. Don't push them too hard, Mrs. Lynn warned one evening, wringing her hands as if the board members could hear her through the hedges. They have ways of making your life impossible. That night, Patricia heard noises outside, slow footsteps crunching gravel, then a faint click. She peeked through the blinds, her breath caught in her throat. A man in a reflective vest stood near her fence, shining a flashlight along the boards as though inspecting every inch. She almost stepped outside to confront him, but something in the way he scribbled notes on a clipboard made her freeze. He wasn't there to repair anything. He was collecting evidence against her. The next morning, the proof was on her doorstep. Another violation. This one claimed her fence paint did not match the approved shade listed in the HOA guidelines. Fine, $500. Patricia's hands shook as she read. She had used the same paint color the previous owner had applied years ago. No one had ever complained then. It felt personal now, like a calculated attack designed to bury her in paperwork and penalties until she couldn't breathe. David suggested consulting a lawyer. Patricia hesitated. Legal fees could drain them faster than the fines. But as she looked at the mounting notices spread across the table, she realized they didn't have a choice. They met with a local attorney, a weary man named Frank who had handled HOA disputes before. He listened carefully, flipping through the documents with a sigh. "They're pushing you into a corner," he said. "This is how it starts. They pile on until you can't pay, then they move for a line." Patricia leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. "Can they really take our house over this?" Frank nodded grimly. "If the fines exceed a certain threshold, yes. They'll file the lien. Tack on legal fees, and you'll be buried under debt. I've seen families lose everything over less than this." His words echoed in Patricia's chest like a death sentence. The fence wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was a noose tightening around their future. After the meeting, David sat silent in the car, his fists clenched on the steering wheel. "We can't let them win," he said finally, his voice low. Patricia wished she shared his certainty, but fear gnawed at her. The anonymous note whispered in her mind again. Who else had been through this? Who had left that warning? And were they still around to tell their story? That evening, Patricia noticed something strange. As she brought in groceries, a neighbor she barely knew, Mark from 2 houses down, gave her a subtle nod. Then, as if by accident, he dropped an envelope at the edge of her driveway. When she picked it up later, her hands trembled. Inside was a photocopy of an old community newsletter. Highlighted in yellow was a story about a family who had fought the HOA over a similar fence issue 5 years earlier. The article claimed they had moved away, but scrawled in pen across the margin was a chilling message. They didn't move. They were forced out. The revelation rattled Patricia. The board had a history, a pattern of targeting homeowners, forcing them out, then reselling the houses at a profit. Suddenly, it wasn't just about her fence. It was about a system built to prey on residents, to squeeze them until they broke. She showed the newsletter to David, who stared at it with tight lips. "This is bigger than us," he muttered. "They've been doing this for years." The pressure only mounted. Letters arrived daily. Calls from unknown numbers filled Patricia's phone. Once, she picked up, only to hear silence, then a faint laugh before the line disconnected. She felt watched, monitored. Even the kids noticed her paranoia, asking why she checked the locks 3 times before bed. Patricia didn't know how to explain that their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage with the walls closing in. 2 weeks in, the fines totaled nearly $6,000. Their savings account was bleeding, credit cards stretched thin. David worked late shifts, trying to pick up overtime, but it barely made a dent. Every bill reminded Patricia of the abyss they were sliding into. And then came the letter that broke her resolve, notice of intent to lien. It was written in bold, unforgiving letters, stamped with a date that felt like a countdown to disaster. She sank onto the floor, the paper clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. This was it. They were one step away from losing everything. She thought of the kids' bedrooms, the family photos on the walls, the meals around the dining table. Could all of that really vanish because she had replaced a fence? Her phone buzzed with another call. Unknown number. She didn't answer. She couldn't bear to hear more threats. Later that night, another envelope appeared in her mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, just slipped inside like the first note. Patricia's hands shook as she opened it. This time, there was no warning. Just a name and an address scribbled in hurried handwriting. A place outside of town. And beneath it, 6 words that made her heart race. We need to talk. Midnight.d. Alone. The address on the note led Patricia down an unfamiliar back road, her headlights cutting through the Georgia darkness. David had begged her not to go alone, but something inside her told her this was the only chance to understand what she was up against. Midnight crept closer with every mile, the silence in the car broken only by the pounding of her heart. She rehearsed excuses in her mind in case it was a trap, but still, she kept driving. The location turned out to be an abandoned gas station, its sign half hanging, the pumps long stripped away. A single figure leaned against the wall under a broken light, face shadowed beneath a hood. Patricia slowed, every instinct screaming to turn back. But the figure raised a hand, not threatening, more like a signal. She parked a safe distance away, clutching the pepper spray David had slipped into her purse. When she stepped out, the night air bit cold, carrying the faint smell of oil and rust. The hooded figure spoke first, a gravelly voice softened by caution. "You're Patricia, right? The fence woman?" She froze at the recognition. He lowered the hood, revealing a weary face, etched with lines of sleepless nights. "Name's Eric. You don't know me, but I know exactly what you're going through. Because it happened to me." Eric explained that 5 years ago, he and his wife had been fined for a deck repair. The HOA piled on violations until the debt was impossible. They fought, hired lawyers, but every motion was delayed. Every appeal dismissed. One morning, deputies showed up with a foreclosure notice. Their house was auctioned within weeks. "We didn't move away by choice," Eric said bitterly. "We were forced out, lost everything. And guess who bought our house back cheap? The HOA president's cousin." Patricia felt her blood run cold. This wasn't negligence or random enforcement. It was a machine. A predatory system designed to squeeze residents, take their homes, and flip them for profit. "But how can they get away with this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Eric's eyes burned with anger. "Because most people are too scared to fight, and those who don't last long. But I couldn't just let you go down without knowing the truth." He handed her a worn manila folder. Inside were copies of court documents, financial statements, even old board meeting minutes. Patricia scanned them under the flickering light, her breath catching as patterns emerged. Families fined into oblivion, liens filed, properties resold through shell, LPDs resold through shell LCs tied to board members. It was systematic theft, hidden behind the guise of community enforcement. Eric's hands trembled as he pushed the folder closer. "Take it, use it, but be careful. They'll come after you harder now." The drive home felt longer than ever. Patricia kept glancing in her rearview mirror, convinced someone was following her. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a bomb, heavy with secrets. When she finally pulled into her driveway, the house looked different, less like a refuge, more like a target. David rushed outside as soon as she parked, his relief quickly replaced with alarm when he saw the folder. She told him everything. Every word Eric had said. By the end, David's face was pale. "This isn't just about us," he whispered. "This is organized theft." The next day, the battle lines sharpened. Another notice arrived, this one demanding immediate payment of $6,500 with the warning that legal action had been initiated. Patricia wanted to scream. They hadn't even caught their breath from the last threat, and already the noose tightened. She showed the folder to Frank, their lawyer. His eyes widened as he flipped through the documents. If this is real, it's not just civil corruption. It's criminal, RICO-level fraud. But when Patricia asked if they could use it in court, Frank's expression darkened. Evidence like this is dangerous. If they know you have it, they'll bury you. That evening, Patricia noticed a black SUV idling near the corner of their street. Its headlights stayed off, engine rumbling low. When she stepped outside, the vehicle pulled away slowly, almost tauntingly. Her skin crawled. David told her she was imagining things, but he kept the porch light on all night. The kids asked why the house suddenly felt tense, why Mom and Dad whispered late into the night. Patricia smiled weakly and lied again, But inside, fear was eating her alive. Days blurred together. Notices piled up. Neighbors grew distant. A few whispered words of encouragement, but most crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. Patricia realized the HOA didn't just control money. They controlled the entire social fabric. To fight them was to become an outcast, a pariah in your own neighborhood. Even church friends stopped calling. The isolation was suffocating. One night, Patricia found a rock on her front porch wrapped in paper. The note inside was short. Pay or leave. No signature, no explanation. Just raw intimidation. David wanted to call the police, but Patricia stopped him. What could they do? File a report against the very board members who probably had connections at City Hall? She thought of Eric, his haunted eyes, his lost home. She realized they were already in the same trap, the same machinery grinding forward. Meanwhile, the financial strain deepened. Their mortgage lender called, concerned about the lien threats. Their credit score dipped as the unpaid fines were reported. Patricia sat at the kitchen table with stacks of bills, her hands shaking as she calculated. If the penalties kept compounding, within months they could owe more than their annual income. Bankruptcy loomed like a shadow. She imagined creditors hounding them, their house stripped, their family uprooted, all because she replaced a fence. But in her darkest hour, the folder gave her a spark of defiance. She began copying the documents, hiding them in safe places. She highlighted names, dates, companies tied to the board. It was overwhelming, but she felt a strange empowerment as she pieced together the puzzle. For the first time, she wasn't just a victim. She was a witness to something much bigger. She swore to herself, if they were going to take her house, they wouldn't do it in silence. Then came the board meeting. Once a month, residents were invited to attend, though few ever dared. Patricia decided to go. David tried to talk her out of it, but she stood firm. They need to see me, she said. They need to know I'm not afraid. That night, she walked into the clubhouse, folder tucked under her arm. The room was filled with rows of folding chairs, mostly empty. At the front sat the board, 5 members, led by President Alan Greer, a man with silver hair and a smile as polished as his cufflinks. When Patricia's turn to speak came, her voice shook at first. She explained her situation, the unfair fines, the financial strain. She held up the violation letters, her hands trembling but steadying with every word. The board members listened with blank expressions, their eyes cold and detached. Alan leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. Mrs. Dean, he said smoothly, you should have read the bylaws more carefully. Rules exist for a reason. We all have to follow them. His tone was calm, but beneath it, Patricia heard menace, a subtle threat that sent a chill down her spine. Patricia wanted to scream, to slam the folder onto the table and expose everything. But something in Alan's eyes stopped her, an unspoken warning, a predator's calm. She realized this wasn't the moment. Not yet. She swallowed her rage, forcing a shaky smile. I will pay what's fair, she said carefully. But I won't be robbed. Alan's smirk deepened, as if amused by her defiance. The meeting moved on, her words dismissed like dust in the wind. Later that night, Patricia opened her mailbox to find another envelope. But this one wasn't from the HOA. It contained a single photograph, her children playing in the backyard, taken from an angle outside the fence. Her hands went cold. Whoever had sent it wanted her to know. This fight wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal, and the war had only just begun. Patricia didn't sleep that night. The photograph of her children burned in her mind like a curse, her pulse thundering with fear and fury. She locked every door, double-checked the windows, and even left lights on through the night. David tried to calm her, insisting it might just be some twisted prank, but she knew better. This was a message. The board, or someone working for them, wasn't just threatening her financially anymore. They were reaching into her life, into her family's safety. That changed everything. The next morning, Patricia snapped photographs of the photograph, storing digital copies in a hidden cloud folder. She added them to the growing mountain of evidence she had begun cataloging, labeling every file meticulously. Fines, notices, liens, witness accounts, now intimidation tactics. She didn't know what her endgame was, but instinct told her to preserve everything. If the board could manipulate courts and city records, maybe the truth had to survive outside official channels. But fear turned quickly into rage. Patricia had never been someone to back down, and now they had threatened her children. Sitting at the kitchen table, she told David, "They think they can scare us into silence. They're wrong." David's eyes were filled with worry. He admired her fire, but he also knew the power of the machine they were fighting. "Pat, they have money, lawyers, connections. You're just one person. They could crush us if they wanted to." Patricia's lips tightened. "Then let them try. I'll make sure everyone sees what they really are." She started small. Whispering to neighbors she trusted, Patricia tested the waters. To her surprise, some confessed quietly that they too had been fined for absurd reasons. A mailbox painted the wrong shade, holiday decorations a day too late, grass an inch too long. Each story was eerily similar. Small violations ballooned into massive fines, threats of lines, intimidation until people either paid up or left. But fear kept them from uniting. "If I speak up, they'll come for me harder," one elderly neighbor whispered through her screen door. Patricia understood, but the isolation fueled her fury. This wasn't incompetence. It was exploitation. Meanwhile, the financial screws tightened. A certified letter arrived from the county clerk. The HOA had officially filed a lien against their property for unpaid fines totaling $9,200. Patricia's hands trembled as she read the words. A lien wasn't just paperwork. It was a chokehold. It meant her credit could tank further, that refinancing their mortgage was impossible, that the board now had legal leverage to push toward foreclosure. David slammed the letter on the counter in disgust. "We fixed a fence, and now they're trying to take our house?" Patricia felt her rage rise like fire. "Then we make sure they never do this to anyone else again." She called Frank, their lawyer, begging him to act quickly. But Frank sounded different now, hesitant, cautious. "Patricia, I'm not sure how much further I can take this. I've been getting calls. Pressure. This case, it's bigger than I realized." Patricia's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're dropping us?" Frank sighed. "I'm telling you to be careful. These people have reach, and sometimes the law isn't enough." The line went dead, leaving Patricia shaking with betrayal. Even the legal system seemed rigged against her. That night, the SUV returned. This time, it parked directly across the street. Patricia yanked open the blinds and stared at it, her blood boiling. "Come out and face me!" she shouted into the night, her voice breaking. The SUV didn't move. Its headlights flicked on briefly, flooding her house in white light before turning off again. Patricia's skin prickled. David pulled her back from the window, his face pale. "They want you rattled," he whispered. "Don't give them what they want." But Patricia couldn't calm down. "They picked the wrong woman to mess with," she hissed. In the following days, Patricia dug deeper into the folder Eric had given her. The more she cross-referenced, the clearer the scheme became. It wasn't just fines. They had turned the neighborhood into a financial trap. Foreclosures were routine. The board used shell companies to scoop up homes dirt cheap, then resell them or rent them out. The president's cousin, the treasurer's brother, even the secretary's husband all appeared on property records. It was a closed circle of greed hidden behind bill laws and community standards. Patricia realized this wasn't just theft. It was racketeering. But how to prove it? How to bring light into such darkness? She remembered Eric's words. Most people are too scared to fight. That's what the board counted on. Silence. But Patricia wasn't silent anymore. She began typing furiously on her laptop, drafting a detailed report with every piece of evidence she had. She contacted a local journalist anonymously, attaching redacted documents. She didn't know if they'd listen, but it was a start. Each click of the keyboard felt like defiance, a blow against the suffocating control the board held. One evening, as she sat typing late into the night, Patricia heard a noise outside. Soft at first, like footsteps crunching gravel. Her chest tightened. She crept to the window, parting the blinds just enough. A shadow moved near the fence. Her fence. Rage flared. She grabbed the flashlight and stormed outside, ignoring David's pleas to wait. The beam cut through the dark, landing on a man crouched by the wood posts. He froze like a deer in headlights, then bolted. Patricia's shout tore through the night. "Get back here!" But the man vanished into the dark, leaving behind only a smear of paint on the fence. Her brand new fence. Marked. She stared at the fresh spray paint, letters forming 2 chilling words. "Next time." Patricia's breath came in ragged gasps. They were escalating. Intimidation had become open threats. David pulled her back inside, locking the door, his voice shaking. "We can't stay here, Pat. This isn't safe for the kids." But Patricia, trembling, shook her head. "If we run, they win. This is our home. I won't let them take it." Her voice broke into a sob, but her eyes burned with defiance. The next board meeting loomed, and Patricia knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She prepared her folder, her evidence, her rage. She rehearsed her words in the mirror, her voice rising with every attempt. She was no longer asking for fairness, she was demanding accountability. David begged her to let it go, to think of the children. But Patricia kissed his forehead, whispering, "I'm doing this for them." "Oh, idiot. Why, The night of the meeting, the clubhouse buzzed louder than usual. Word had spread of Patricia's defiance, and more neighbors showed up than ever before. Folding chairs filled, whispers rippled, the atmosphere tense with expectation. At the front, Alan Greer sat smugly, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his hands folded like a king before his subjects. When Patricia stood, the room quieted. Her voice rang clear. "This board has turned our neighborhood into a prison of fear. You fine us, threaten us, take our homes. But I have proof that you profit from our pain." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she held the folder high. Alan's smile never faltered. His calm was more terrifying than rage. "Mrs. Dean," he said smoothly, "I warned you about spreading lies. This is defamation, and we will pursue every legal remedy." His words were slow, deliberate, meant to plant fear. But Patricia didn't waver. "Then take me to court," she shot back, her hand trembling only slightly. "Because when you do, the truth will come out. And when it does, you'll be the ones answering questions." The crowd buzzed louder, neighbors exchanging glances, some nodding in agreement. Alan leaned closer, his smile fading into steel. "Careful, Patricia. Families can get hurt when people play games they don't understand." His words dripped with menace, just loud enough for her to hear. Patricia's stomach twisted, but she stood tall, her chin raised. The battle lines had been drawn in full view of the neighborhood. There was no going back. And deep down, Patricia knew something terrible was coming. The morning after the board meeting, Patricia awoke to silence, an unnatural, suffocating quiet that pressed on her chest. The neighborhood, usually alive with the hum of sprinklers and barking dogs, felt deserted. When she stepped outside, the air was heavy with watchfulness. Curtains twitched shut. Eyes darted away. She felt like she was walking through an occupied town, where everyone knew something but no one dared speak. She went to the mailbox, praying for a normal letter. A bill. Anything ordinary. Instead, another notice stared back at her. The fines had ballooned again, now over $14,000. The words, "Final warning. Foreclosure proceedings pending," stabbed into her brain like knives. David found her sitting on the curb, the letter crumpled in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "We can't keep doing this," he whispered. "They're going to bury us." Patricia looked up at him, her eyes swollen with tears but burning with fury. "Then we bury them first," she spat. "I won't let them take everything from us. Not this house. Not our family." Her voice trembled, but her conviction was a fire that fear could no longer smother. That evening, Patricia made a choice. She pulled out the manila folder Eric had given her and laid it across the kitchen table. The kids were asleep, David pacing nervously, but Patricia's hands were steady. She organized every page into a timeline: fines issued, liens filed, houses sold, connections to board members. She photographed the documents, scanned them, saved them to encrypted drives. Then she composed a message, an email addressed to 3 investigative journalists, the state attorney general's office, and a watchdog nonprofit. She attached the files, her heart pounding as she hovered over the send button. With a deep breath, she clicked. There was no turning back now. Days passed with no response. Patricia went about her routine. Tension stretched thin, every sound outside making her flinch. The SUV still came and went, lingering like a shadow. One night she woke to the smell of smoke, bolting upright in terror, only to realize it was the neighbor's grill. Her nerves were raw, shredded by the constant sense of being hunted. David begged her to think of the children, to let it go. But Patricia couldn't. The folder was no longer just evidence. It was her shield, her weapon, the only thing standing between them and ruin. Finally, the call came. A journalist named Claire, her voice crisp, urgent. "I got your files," she said. "If what you sent is true, this is explosive. But I need proof it's real. Originals, not copies." Patricia's blood ran cold. Originals meant risk. Originals meant exposure. "Meet me in person," Claire insisted. "Bring everything. Tonight." Patricia hesitated, but she agreed. She couldn't afford to lose this chance. David protested furiously when she told him, but Patricia silenced him with a single look. "If we don't fight, we're finished anyway." The meeting place was a diner off the interstate, buzzing with late-night truckers and insomniacs. Patricia sat in a corner booth, the folder clutched to her chest, her eyes scanning every face. Claire arrived, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, confident, professional. She slid into the booth, ordered coffee, then leaned close. "This is bad," she whispered, flipping through the documents. "Really bad. You're talking about a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of a homeowners association. If this holds up, it's jail time for half your board." Patricia felt a flicker of hope. But then Claire's expression hardened. "You need to understand, if we run this story, they'll come after you harder than ever. Are you ready for that?" Patricia's throat tightened. "I don't have a choice," she said softly. They agreed to keep in touch, Claire promising to verify the documents and push the investigation forward. But as Patricia drove home, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. Too close, too persistent. Her hands tightened on the wheel, her pulse hammering. She tried switching lanes, taking exits, doubling back. The car followed. Panic clawed at her chest. She floored the accelerator, racing through back roads until finally the headlights disappeared. She pulled into her driveway shaking, the folder still safe, but her fear now absolute. Someone knew. The next day, retaliation came. A letter taped to her front door, written in jagged block letters. "Stop, or we stop you." Patricia's knees nearly buckled as she read it. David grabbed it, crumpling it with shaking hands. "That's it. We're calling the police." But Patricia laughed bitterly. "And tell them what? That our HOA is running a crime syndicate? They'll laugh us out of the station." Still, she photographed the note, added it to her growing archive of terror. The evidence wasn't just on paper anymore. It was carved into her life, her family's fear, her sleepless nights. The next board meeting was chaos. Dozens of neighbors showed up, many emboldened by Patricia's defiance, others furious at the rising fees and unexplained budgets. Patricia stood in the crowd, folder clutched tight, her heart pounding as Alan Greer took the podium. His silver hair gleamed, his voice smooth as ever. "We've heard rumors spreading through this community," he began, his eyes sliding toward Patricia. "Lies, slander, dangerous misinformation that threatens the stability of our neighborhood." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We will not tolerate it." Patricia couldn't stay silent. She rose, holding up the folder for everyone to see. "These aren't lies. These are records. Proof that you've stolen homes from families, profited off our pain, destroyed lives. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, accusations. Alan's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "Sit down, Mrs. Dean," he hissed, "or you'll regret it." Patricia's voice rose above the noise. "No, we all deserve to know the truth. You've turned this community into your personal bank, and I won't let you hide anymore." Alan's composure cracked. He slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming. "Enough!" The room fell silent, the air electric with fear. "Mrs. Dean has chosen war," he declared coldly. "So be it." His words echoed like a sentence passed. Patricia felt the weight of the entire room press against her. Some neighbors looking at her with admiration, others with fear, some with thinly veiled hostility. The lines had been drawn, clear and irrevocable. After the meeting, Patricia hurried home with David, their children clinging to her legs, frightened by the tension they didn't fully understand. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window set her nerves ablaze. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder, wondering if she had doomed them all. But then her phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "I've verified 2 of your documents. This is real. The story runs next week. Hold tight." Patricia's heart leapt with hope and terror in equal measure. Next week. Could she survive that long? The following days were the longest of Patricia's life. The SUV returned, closer this time, idling directly outside her driveway. Anonymous calls came at midnight, silent but heavy with threat. Her credit cards were suddenly frozen, her accounts flagged with suspicious activity. It was clear. The board's reach was everywhere. David begged her to flee, to take the kids and leave the state until the storm passed. But Patricia shook her head. "If we run, they win. If we fight, maybe, just maybe, we save more than ourselves." Oh. Then came the breaking point. Patricia returned home one evening to find her fence. The fence that started it all, ripped apart, the wood shattered across her yard like bones. Spray paint smeared across the siding of her house, read only one word: evicted. Her knees buckled as tears streamed down her face. David pulled her close, fury and despair mixing in his voice. "They won't stop, Pat. They'll destroy everything." Patricia clenched her fists, her body trembling. "Then let them come. I won't be silent. Not now, not ever." The story broke that weekend. Claire's article hit the front page, complete with documents, quotes, and damning evidence. The headline screamed corruption, detailing the pattern of foreclosures and profiteering. Local news picked it up, cameras descending on the neighborhood. Patricia watched from her living room window as reporters swarmed the gates, microphones shoved at board members, questions shouted into the air. Alan Greer appeared on camera, his smile gone, his voice brittle with denial. "These are baseless lies from a disgruntled homeowner," he sneered. But cracks had formed in his armor. The world was watching now. For a brief moment, Patricia felt victorious. Neighbors who once avoided her now whispered support, some even hugging her, thanking her for speaking out. But the victory was fragile, fleeting. That night, as the house finally grew quiet, Patricia found another envelope taped to her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 chilling words. "It's not over yet." Niran. Sharadizo. Patricia sank into a chair, the letter trembling in her hands. She thought of her children asleep upstairs, of David's exhausted face, of Eric who had already lost everything. She realized the war was only beginning. Even with the world watching, even with evidence out in the open, the people she was fighting were too powerful, too connected, too ruthless to give up easily. Her fight had exposed them, but it had also painted a target on her back forever. She stared into the darkness outside her window, her jaw set. One thought thundered in her mind. If they want war, they'll get it. And the night swallowed her vow whole, leaving the future uncertain, the danger far from over.